My name is Brian Knight. I'm with Nitel. We're a US-based internet service provider. I want to talk to you today real quick about what we've seen during SD-WAN customer premise deployments. Quick bit about who we are. We're a US-based wireline internet service provider, so your internet MPLS layer 2 Ethernet services. We're very focused on business customers. We've got 7 POPs around the country, so we operate our own network. In addition to that, we also do managed hardware, so routers, VoIP gateways, we do firewalls for customers, and now we do SD-WAN. So what was SD-WAN to us when we started this project? We envisioned this as an easy MPLS VPN replacement, something that we could drop in and offer customers the good virtual private networking without having to run a wire line down to the customer side and do an MPLS VPN. We wanted the ability to utilize multiple links. So we wanted to be able to steer and load balance customer traffic across those multiple links. We wanted to provide security services. So we already had experience with the firewall, with dropping firewalls at customer Prems, so we wanted to continue offering that and expanding that offering. We also wanted to offer customers the ability to have a multi-tenant portal so that they could log in, they could see their traffic, they could see their configuration, they could do, they could interact with their installation. And we wanted to do all of this on inexpensive hardware. So instead of deploying routers that were made by the bigger players, we just deploy an x86 box and be done. So as we dug into as we gained experience with the platform, we also found, and we talked with customers, we found that they also wanted to do internet load balancing without the hassle of getting the /24 and the ASN number and do BGP with the multiple carriers. They wanted to connect their firewall into a box that would load balance across 2 circuits and not have to go through this additional hassle. And we found also that the ability to load balance traffic flows across the 2 different circuits became less important to the customer. We went with 2 vendor solutions, whom I'll name Vendor Q and Vendor Z. Vendor Q, it's a newer company and a newer SD-WAN offering. These guys wrote their own software stack, put it on the market, and geared it mainly towards service providers such as us. They provide a multi-tenant web portal. They do centralized analytics as well on logs. So all of the deployed CPE boxes report up to a centralized software stack, and the logs are they're kept within that stack. So I mentioned the core stack of servers. There's 3 servers in this solution. There's the management console, that's that pane of glass the customers log into. There's a virtualized route reflector that runs BGP among all the nodes. They call it a controller. And then there's the log gathering and log database items. Vendor Z, they're a little older, a little more established. They adapted their firewall product. They had a pre-existing firewall product. They adapted that to do SD-WAN. They have a centralized configuration server, but all of the logging, all of the information about sessions is kept on the firewall at the premises. So if you want to see firewall, you have to log into the firewall that's at that location and view the logs there. There's no centralization of that. That makes the core components very easy. There's a single management console server that's required. If the customer needs to get regular reports out of their SD-WAN or out of their firewalls, there are servers that can be built up. Those servers reach out to the devices, gather up those logs, and generate the reports. We went live in June 2017 with Vendor Q. Vendor Z went live 8 months later. And right now we're sitting at a little over 250 units, shipped to about 35 customers. So here are some of the challenges that we went through. Sourcing the white label hardware for Vendor Q's offering turned out to be fairly difficult. Those vendors don't stock hardware by themselves. So we found ourselves placing orders, and the vendors would turn around and say, "Oh, okay, your hardware will be ready in about 8 to 12 weeks. 8 to 12 weeks. So the vendor queue has realized this is a big deal, and they're helping to reduce these intervals, but it still remains a challenge for us. Software, there's right now a gold rush going on in the SD-WAN market. Everyone's in a rush to capitalize on it. So code quality can sometimes be a struggle. And we found this with some of the newer players is we'll have the odd software crash that we have to work through and figure out. We encountered a learning curve. With the newer vendor queue, we had to learn their system, and we had to start from ground zero and work through those issues. And being a newer vendor, their documentation isn't built up quite as much as some of the other players, so that's another contributing factor. One of the big challenges we've encountered is customer readiness. So we come in with an offering that has a lot of functionality in it. So integrating our stuff with the customer LAN networks requires a deep conversation between ourselves and the customer. With routing, it's relatively easy. I got a bunch of prefixes. I need to route traffic between them. Okay, great. Maybe you've got a router on your LAN. We integrate with that. Okay, done. Layer 4 firewall, throw that in the mix. Becomes a little bit harder. You have to understand what the customer's security policy is, and then you have to replicate that onto the device that you install. With a next-gen firewall, it gets even harder. You have to know the things you need to know for a Layer 4 firewall, plus you also must know about the customer's IDS IPS settings, antivirus, and URL filtering, any other components. So you have more information to put into the system. And then finally with SD-WAN, you must know all of the above, plus you have to understand how the customer wants to route their traffic across these multiple links. We found that integrating a customer's existing MPLS network turned out to be unexpectedly difficult. One of our vendors, vendor queue, requires access to that core stack that we've built up in order to operate. Well, within a third-party MPLS network, there is no reachability except if the customer puts a firewall in their network, it announces that to all of their sites, and it can route that traffic back out the internet and hit our stack. And this tends to lead to failure modes that are difficult to describe to the customer. It's difficult to have a conversation with them about that. Third-party MSPs, working with the third party on behalf of the customer, it tends to increase that difficulty, but not always. Finally, metered internet connections have been a challenge for us. Vendor queue uses ping probes to determine reachability. So take a 3-site network. All 3 sites are going to ping each other in order to determine if the links are up or down. It turns out if you connect that to a 3G, 4G network, it leads to some interesting bills coming your way. So we had to work through some of those issues. We learned during that switching to a hub and spoke topology helps alleviate that in a big way. Prior to that, we were deploying in a mesh configuration, where all nodes would ping all others. And that's all I have. I think we have 30 seconds for questions. Quick, go.
All right, let's thank the speaker.